Live. Okay, thank you for joining us once again. This is Arnie Johnson. I am an editor and collaborator with the Moxie Institute and Let It Ripple and all the great stuff they're doing. And today is Character Day, so it's time for some new films from these organizations. The great An Adaptable Mind and The Making of a Mensch both had their premiere today. And of course on Character Day a year ago, we had The Science of Character, and so we're using those films. We're launching into several great conversations all day long, and hopefully inspiring conversations out there in the Twitter sphere and in person about character and menschiness and all of those delightful topics. And so today, our next guests here to talk to us about this subject are Becky Sipos. Is that right? Sipos or Sipos? Sipos, yep. And Dara Feldman. And both of them are deeply involved in various aspects of character development. Dara is an educator, author, and character education specialist. And Becky is the president and CEO of Character.org. So there's no way around her being involved in character since she owns the URL itself. And so I would love to just start out with both of you giving a little bit of background about yourself and what you're doing in this field. Let's start with you, Becky.
Well, I came to Character.org from a teaching career. I taught for 32 years, but because of my husband's job, I changed schools every 2 years as we moved around, and I soon learned that the schools that I thought were the best are the ones that had good character programs. So when I retired from teaching and came to the nonprofit, I was deeply committed to the importance of teaching character. And you're absolutely right about the impact of Character Day. We've been receiving so many emails and tweets about character all day long. And we love that you brought attention to character. It's our focus every day of the year. We provide resources and trainings and support, a real support network for teachers who want to do this. And I'm happy to tell more in detail, but I love to go visit our schools of character. I love to get teachers passionate about this because I really believe it makes a difference.
Wonderful. Dara?
Yeah, so I'm grateful to be on with everybody, and especially with my dear friend Becky. The way that I got into character, I was a teacher in Montgomery County Public Schools for 16 years, and about 10 years ago we were so focused on academic rigor and testing, and I was honored as Disney's Outstanding Elementary Teacher of the Year and found out about the Virtues Project, which is 5 strategies for bringing out the best in ourselves and others. And I realized that that's why I received this honor, because I was supposed to share it with other educators. So I ended up leaving and looking for other people, places, and things, and I found out about Character.org, and so tied my little dinghy to their beautiful boat, and am one of their trainers as well. And it has led me on this journey of personal, professional, and organizational transformation. So in addition to the Virtues Project and Character.org, which I love, I also am a faculty member for ASCD Whole Child and an instructor for Restorative Practices, the International Institute for Restorative Practices. So there's this big buzz, and everybody really, I think, is getting on board character, and I'm so grateful to Moxie for really elevating the conversation. So thank you for this great opportunity.
Great, thank you both. I'm going to ask some questions that will, be for both of you to jump in, and every once in a while they'll be specific. So if I don't say your name as the cue, you can feel free to jump into the conversation as you see fit.
Okay.
The first question I have is just, I think, and the Adaptable Mind sort of addresses this in some of Tiffany's earlier work, that the world there are a lot of things in some ways that work against the idea that character is strength. I mean, I think a lot of the way we interact on the internet, people are sort of unhinged from personal encounter, and they say things that they wouldn't say if they were next to somebody or because they're anonymous. Can you talk a little bit about, in that kind of milieu, the urgency of developing character in a way that is adaptable to the way this world is changing?
Absolutely. Becky, may I jump in?
Sure.
So before I was a character, I was an instructional technology specialist and really lived my life online. And this was actually in the 90s. And so I think that although there are opportunities, whether it's online or face-to-face, to either come from a strength place of character or not, that we have an opportunity to help strengthen and develop character, compassion, and empathy. We are no longer, the world is no longer flat, right?
Mhm.
And so we can leverage the power of technology to see what's going on around the world, just like in the Adaptable Mind movie with the Ebola crisis, and how to put a face with, and that's just a way to make the connections. And so Facebook can be used for positive ways and negative ways, but it also helps to create and strengthen really the universal principles of who we are, and that's what character is. So I think if we focus on what we're for and not what we're against, and we lead as we're doing this online in a positive way, it can really help to elevate and strengthen one another's character, because we do develop character in community, and online can help us have that community.
Let me add to that. I think you're right, Dara, but I think we have to work at building that community. It really worries me that we have become so siloed. We're living in gated communities. We subscribe only to the news feed that we want to receive, and we're trying to just isolate ourselves. But I loved in the Adaptable Mind thinking of all those internet connections as neurons and building that. So I think we have to teach that sense of global citizenship and that responsibility and that empathy, even in that anonymous environment of the internet.
Absolutely. And Becky, that's why I think character.org is a great organization, because we need to be intentional, proactive, and comprehensive when it comes to teaching character and also teaching technology. Just because our young people or our young teachers are wired, they're digital natives, it doesn't mean that they necessarily know how to leverage the power of technology to help strengthen connections in character. Character.org does a great job with that.
Yeah, I think that we always say that you're a character educator whether you want to be or not. But it's so much more effective when you're intentional about it and decide what is important to you and go about achieving those results. And that's the difference. We can't just leave character development to the media. We have to think about what kind of children, what kind of people we want them to become.
Yeah, and one other piece is, kids are not just consumers of media, they're also the makers of media. And the V channel is doing a great job of focusing on positive character qualities. And so I know that the V channel is looking for different youth to be part of the V crew and to develop their own videos and blogs, etc., to help elevate the conversation and to create that positive impact in the world. Because young people ages 14 to 24, idealism is their strength virtue, and so since they're already connected and wired, we can also help them be inspired and leverage technology to do that.
Do you, Becky, and you as well, Dara, but you, it was interesting what you were saying about how important it is online to, in this sort of semi-anonymous world, to emphasize these traits and community and local citizenship. I'm curious, do you see that there's a sort of, we talk about character, is there is character translatable in the online world to sort of the, whatever we'll call the real world, the offline world? Is there a separate way that we construct character online? Is it more intentional? Is there something that we have to be more practiced about? Or is there a difference, or do you find that the same things, if you emphasize this strength in yourself in one arena, it's going to be strong in the other?
Well, to a certain extent, I think if you have developed a good sense of empathy, you're going to feel that when you're online or not. But I do think that because there aren't those adult models there watching kids when they're online so much, that if a habit hasn't been established, it can get lost. So I think it's something we do have to be careful about, and do show that hurt can come from online, the cyberbullying and stuff. And I think once they understand that, and we talk about ways to behave in the internet, they'll get it. But it doesn't happen automatically.
Mm-hmm. And to piggyback, I also think that there may be some opportunities for a false sense of courage and confidence, because you can hide behind your computer and you don't have the affects, and so you don't necessarily get that emotional charge when you maybe have to stand up in front of a million people around the world and have a conversation about character. Because right now, Becky, it's just the three of us. But if we really knew who was listening, maybe we wouldn't have so much confidence.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting issue about character, and we talked about this somewhat in the last conversation with Mary Beth, who's the sort of not star exactly, but the featured voice in The Adaptable Mind. That she found that she had all these sort of disparate character traits that kind of gathered themselves around this project, things that she didn't think were connected to her sort of unified version of herself or her journey. That became that which she found this, this passion that she followed. Can you talk a little bit about how that kind of, how it is that people have these latent strengths, or I mean, these aren't things that you're going out in the store and like, I'm going to add a little bit of grit and I'm going to put a little sprinkling of empathy in here. This is something that you're finding in yourself and developing in some way.
Becky, do you want to answer that first?
Well, I'll talk a little bit about the quality that you talked about, that metacognition. I think it's really important to put the terms to it, and to name it is to own it a little bit. So the more we talk about the things, these kinds of qualities and the strengths, and we really look at everyone from their potential to develop rather than the negatives. We have such a pattern of negatives. You did that wrong, you need to be remediated. Let's invest in the positives and focus on that more, and I think they will develop more strongly when we talk about them more rather than focusing on the negatives.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things that I most appreciated about the Virtues Project, because the first strategy is speaking the language of virtues. So imagine that you walk by one of your students, a first grader, and they're working on a hard problem without giving up. Instead of just saying, good job, being able to say, I see your determination working through that hard problem without giving up. By labeling that working through that hard problem and calling it determination, it's making it visible, and it then becomes a transferable skill. So when they know that they have it in them, next time that something's hard, they hear that tape going, I have determination, it's doing something hard, let me keep going.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, and I think that's why our first 3 principles of our 11 principles framework for effective character education deals with your core values. We know there's all kinds of good values out there, but which ones are important for your community or for you as a person? You have to think about it, and those might change over time, but you choose a few to focus on and articulate. What does it look like? What does it feel like? And be real intentional about those.
I think when I was working as a tutor once, I was working with a lot of students who were writing college essays, but who had English as a second language and were having a lot of grammatical struggles. And I found that when I helped them to understand why they were writing the paper, a lot of times they wanted to understand how to organize it and how to structure it. But once I could get them connected to the material so that they believed in what they were writing about, a lot of those grammatical errors sort of cleared up. Like they wouldn't stumble anymore because they sort of knew what their voice was or what they wanted to say in that. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about, in the context of character, it seems like a lot of what you're saying and what we've heard a lot of today is that if you find that, that these things about our character, things that are character traits, I think sometimes it can feel really disparate. Like, gosh, do I have 24 character traits? It seems like a lot to think about and to add. And just to your point, Becky, you've said focusing in on a few. It seems also that these character traits really come to the fore when you find a place to use them. I mean, that you're not just sitting there being like, I'm going to add this to it, but I'm going to, become an advocate for this cause, or I'm going to reach out to people, and then empathy comes to you realize that you had more empathy than you thought. Can you talk a little bit about how in practice, how we bring these character traits or how they can come to the fore without us, developing them as if they're, separate entities that we're just sort of adding to ourselves?
Well, it's sort of how I feel about character education as a whole. Sometimes I'll talk to educators and they said, no, I can't add one more thing to the plate. And we all say, it's not one more thing, it is the plate. It's a shift in your thinking of how you do everything. So when you're planning your lessons, there is a character lesson in absolutely every lesson. It's in the delivery, the way you conduct your classroom. It's in the themes of the lesson, whether it's science or history or literature. So once you get into thinking about it as a whole, it just becomes automatic. But it's hard getting there. You have to put some intentionality to it. But you can't think of it as an add-on. Okay, let's take 15 minutes and have a character lesson.
Yeah, it's about meeting kids where they're at. So when it's relevant and it's meaningful for them, you know, when I think about principle number 5, which is moral action and service learning, right? That's something when kids, they're really passionate, they want to make a difference. So you find out what is on their minds and hearts, and then we help to inspire them and give them the tools to put it into action. And we're all born with these virtues, character strengths in us in potential, and some we have are stronger than others and more easily accessible. Like for me, I have a little too much enthusiasm sometimes, in case you couldn't tell. So patience and self-discipline, moderation, not so much. But there are ways to develop it. And we don't develop our character qualities in isolation. So when we can mirror back for others and recognize when maybe perhaps I am being more patient or calling on self-discipline, and somebody points it out to me, that's when it grows a little bit. But points it out in a very positive and supportive way instead of a shaming way.
Great, and we have a couple questions here from our audience, and just to mention to folks, if you add questions to the Q&A bar side on next to this conversation, we'll try to fit them in with our speaker. So I have a rather short question, which you will answer quickly, I'm sure. What day is Character Day next year? Do we know that yet?
Do we know? It comes from Moxie.
Oh.
What day is Character Day? You guys answer that. Let us know. We'll put it on the calendar.
That's a really good question. That's great. I actually know that myself. We don't know yet. It hasn't been settled yet.
As far as character.org is concerned, every day is Character Day.
That's right. That is a very nice answer. Thank you, Becky, for rescuing me from my lack of knowledge. And then the other question is a much bigger and broader question in the context of what we're saying. I mean, I think it's an interesting question. I'll just sort of flesh out this question a little bit. That, you know, I think it's easy to see sometimes like glass half full, glass empty kind of stuff. You have been talking about emphasizing the positive on a local level with kids and as they grow, but also maybe talk a little bit about a larger sense. I mean, you could easily make an argument that character is falling through the floor and people don't care about each other and empathy scores are going down. But you know, things like Character Day and all these things that are also sort of bubbling up from the surface can tell a very different narrative. Tell me a little bit about how you see that narrative and what, you know, how optimistic you are for our shared future as a global species.
I'm going to go back to you.
Go first, Dara, and then I'll jump in.
So I do a lot of work around the world in different cultures. And I do think that there is an elevation and a desire for strengthening our character and getting back to those human principles. I think what we're seeing in business now is this longing for a culture of appreciation and integrity and things that we can start doing. Everybody is just, again, acknowledging what's going well and showing a little bit of appreciation, because that raises the vibration, makes people feel like they've been seen, heard, and valued. We can also do that as parents at home. Not like, why didn't you do your homework, but how was your day? You know, starting to build those relationships and say, you know, please be purposeful and finish your homework. So I do think there is an elevation of awareness that people are committed to, and now it's how do we shift and change in this paradigm to be more noble in the way that we were born.
I think there's a hunger out there for it right now, and I see it when I go.
Shoot. Oh, no.
Come back.
Sorry, Becky. Becky, I'm sorry. Hold on just a second. I accidentally... there you are. Okay, say what you were saying again, Becky, because I accidentally crossed you out.
She's still muted. She looks still muted. But that's okay. So this is a teachable moment, and we're all going to learn patience.
Sorry. Hold on just a second, everybody. I accidentally...
Good, and humility, asking for help. Like, this happens all the time.
Yes. I'm not sure why.
Or Becky, you can call me on my cell phone, and I'll speak for you.
Does
Is she muted?
Becky, can you hear me? You log out and log back in if you can hear me, and I'll let Dara answer while you do that, okay? Because something happened on our side and it muted you without me being
Oh,
able to.
no, now you're good.
I think it's back.
Oh, there you are.
Am I okay?
Yes, you're great. Okay, go ahead and speak, Becky. Sorry.
Okay, I was saying, I think there's a hunger out there for good character right now. And I was going to give two stories. One, it comes from this Let It Ripple. I think you can see the power when it happens. And there was a community in California where some of the schools took our 11 principles and became named schools of character. And the community began to see the power, the transformative power of this. And so the city council, when they were starting to have a contentious debate, started referring to the same core values that the schools were using. Pretty soon, the police department adopted those core values. Pretty soon, they called themselves a community of character. So what started at the schools, the adults saw the power, and it rippled out. I'll give another example, comes from that thinking that we're just teaching for tomorrow. I went to a pre-K through first grade school. And usually when I go into a school, first the principal brings me in and introduces me to the leadership committee. Not this school. They took me into a room. There was a whole circle of maybe 24, 4, 5, and 6 years old. No adults. They're telling me about the school. I asked them, what if somebody gets in a fight? What do you do? And they said, well, we either talk it out, work it out, or walk it out. And I asked them what they meant, and they talked about trying to understand each other. If that didn't work, the work it out was rock, paper, scissors. But the walk it out was they went out on their playground and walked a peace path. And on this peace path were things that helped them to de-stress and so on and focus on their core values. So if little kids could even come to that understanding, there is great hope for our country. And I think we just have to let it ripple.
Wonderful. Thank you, Becky. And Dara, we're just about done, but we have a great question here that somebody just asked, and I want to bring them in to ask it, if I can. Let's see. I know I don't actually know how to do that, so I'll just read it. This is, isn't life circumstances every day that give us the opportunity to use our virtues and character traits? Isn't daily life the opportunity to see our strength and challenge virtues and figure out what we might